of the July 3rd Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, Mississippi to order. We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and we will follow that with an invocation by Alderman Vaughn and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Our God and our Father, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Father God, in the name of Jesus, we just like to say good evening to you. We will look to the hills from which all our help come from you. We pray now, God, that you will please forgive us of all our sins, that's known and unknown, seen and unseen, and blot out our transgression. Pray now, Father God, that you will move with your holy power and your spirit, move among this mayor and this board members and the department head and every city employee. Father God, that we will handle these affairs the way that you want us to handle them, not the way we want to do it, but your way. You said in your words that our ways are not your ways, and our thoughts are not yours, and are far from the east to the west. We pray, Father God, that you will give us a strong mind and a strong heart, granting us the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that you granted King Solomon, being able to discern right, wrong, good, and evil for your peoples, teaching us how to love one another in spirit and in truth, but most of all, with faith and in good hope. We thank you for being that great God, a God that is able to do all things but fail, a God that look beyond all our faults and still continue to fill our needs. We thank you so much. We love you. We thank you for our big brother, our Redeemer, our salvation. We thank you for only begotten beloved Son that was born of a Virgin Mary. Joseph was his earthly father, God, who you allowed to be crucified, died, and buried. But in 3 days, you raised your Son from the dead. He said at the right hand of you, make an intercession for old sinners and wretches like us. Thank you for Jesus. We pray now again that you will fill this place with your Holy Spirit, allowing each and every last one of us to conduct ourselves decent and order. But at the end of the day, we will give all praise and honor and glory to you, God, because of who you are and what you are. Thank you for being our God and we are your servants. Most of all, thank you for being our Father and we are little children. Thank you for controlling our destiny, not leaving us in the hand of no man. It is in the mighty name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
All right, we'd like to welcome everyone here today. We appreciate y'all being here. We will now move into approval of the official agenda with the consented items. Do I have any suggestions for, if you will notice, you have an agenda that is not the one that went out on Friday. We have deleted 3 items from the agenda. They are, let me enumerate them while we're here. Under Parks, items 1 and 2, and under Police Department, item 1. Those have been deleted from the agenda to be moved to the 17th, pending some insurance and contract adjustments. So we have entertained a motion for, or not a motion, but suggestions for the consent agenda.
May I be recognized?
Yes, you may.
Mayor, I'd like to remove under executive session, item A, personnel.
You don't, okay.
I'd like to remove it.
Okay. Do I have any discussion on removing item A under personnel? Any discussion? Okay, so we will delete personnel from the executive session item, or agenda. Any further changes to the consent? Alderman Vaughn.
I'm on Roman number 4, board minutes, move June 15 minutes from there.
Okay, removal of the June 15th minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
From consent.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right. Anyone else, anything else? Oh, and I'm sorry, I should have noted, Alderman Carver is attending telephonically, so he is there. Alderman Carver, would you verify that for me, please, sir?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
All right, thank you. And that will necessitate a roll call vote. So, any other changes to the agenda or the consent agenda? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda with the consent agenda items?
So moved.
As modified.
Second.
A motion from Alderman Little and a second from Alderman Miller. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, if you would answer yea or nay as the city clerk calls your name. Alderman Carver.
Yay.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Yay.
Alderman Little.
Yay.
Alderman Walker.
Yay.
Alderman Miller.
Yay.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
All right, by a vote of 7-0, motion carries. Thank you. I will now read the consent agenda items. First one is consideration of the minutes of the June 5, 2018 meeting of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, Mississippi. Under Finance Administration, second is request permission to accept a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi Foundation period of the Healthy Heroes Program for the amount of $44,647. City would use these funds to purchase fitness equipment for an on-site fitness center at the fire department and to put it in a walking track at Fire Station 2. It is a 100% grant with no cost to the city. Item 3, under Parks, request permission to allow Gary Logan to attend National Recreation and Park Association Conference in Indianapolis, Indiana on September 24th through 28th of 2018. And last but not least, the Utilities Department requests permission to allow Terry Kemp to attend Seven States Power Corporate Board meeting and follow-up meeting on July the 15th through the 17th, 2018 in Chattanooga. And that concludes the consent agenda items. All right, first item then for business that must be approved would be the consideration of the minutes of the June 15th meeting of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion from Alderman
Second.
Walker, a second from Alderman Miller. Discussion? All right, seeing none, if you would, please answer yea or nay as the city clerk calls your meeting.
Alderman Carver.
Yay.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Yay.
Alderman Little.
Yay.
Alderman Walker.
Yay.
Alderman Miller.
Yay.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
All right, by a vote of 5-2, the motion carries. All right, those minutes are approved. Under mayor's comments, first let me make sure that everyone knows, everyone in hearing and seeing knows that we've got our fireworks display tomorrow. We've got activities all out of the Sportsplex, I believe from 5 to 9. Activities for the children. We're gonna have water so everybody can stay hydrated, and the fireworks should be at about 9 o'clock as soon as it gets dark. So we should be having a great turnout. We had a fabulous turnout last year, and I expect us to do so again this year. Everybody brave the heat, but it'll be a wonderful celebration. So I encourage everyone to come out. We all had most of us attended MML, and so I always say that when we go to these things, we bring back information, and I learned some things. Like what types of personality. I went to Henry and Sandra, Alderman Vaughn and Alderman Sistrunk, and I went to this thing where we learned what kind of personality we had. I'm not sure we all know exactly, but anyway, it was how to work with others. It was a good session. I also attended the session that Dr. Barrett and Alderman Miller put together, which was a very good session on water and rates and working capital for exactly the subject we're going to take on tonight. So if anyone wants to share anything that they learned while there, please feel free to do so. I think Alderman Sistrunk learned about travel policy.
I did.
You want to share any of that? Or
I learned that the state develops some pretty unusual statutory requirements for travel policies. If a travel advance is given to a staff member or an elected official or an employee, that you have to provide receipts or pay back the difference in those amounts. I learned that if you are reimbursed after the fact, receipts are not, hard receipts are not required. However, you need to have something that's sufficiently documented so that you don't get in trouble at some point further down the road with the state auditor's office, as a couple of people in other cities have done. And I learned that there is no such thing as a per diem in the state of Mississippi. There is a cap on how much we can reimburse for meals during a travel. So.
the numbers person has now shared numbers. So anyway, I apologize. That was Mayor's comments, and now I dragged Alderman Sistrunk into it.
You did.
Board
I'm
comments.
a type 4 personality, compliant, numbers driven. So.
Do we have any Board of Aldermen comments?
Mayor, briefly.
Alderman Little, sure.
I'd just like to thank and commend the group that put up the flags. I'm not sure which, it used to be a realtor group, I'm not sure which ones.
I
I'm
think
not
it
gonna call
still
it
is.
that. I'm not sure
Actually, I think
which
it's
one. but,
Remax who puts them up.
Nothing looks better or prettier coming into the downtown area when you see that every year. I always look forward to that, so I just wanted to thank that group. And I wish everyone a happy and safe 4th of July, staff, board, and mayor
Yes.
included.
Yes, and while we're at it, remember to put the pets inside, please, because they are petrified of loud noises and all that, all the like. Yes, sir. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to say very briefly, just more or less a thank you note. I want to just say that today marks my 25th year as an alderman for the city of Starkville, and I said that to say thanks to Ward 6 and thanks to the city of Starkville for it, up to this point, allowing me to have served 25 years as of today. Thank you.
Yes, and congratulations. A quarter of a century.
Congratulations.
Okay, anyone else, anything else? All right, and this is our annual marker. We've been here exactly a year, so. All right, seeing nothing else, we will now go into citizens' comments. Everyone has 3 minutes in which to share their thoughts with the board. So if you would step forward and give us your name, and we will give you your 3 minutes. Mr. Turner, how are you?
All right, Larry, good evening to the mayor and the board of aldermen.
Good evening, Mr. Turner.
All right, my name is Adam Turner, Ward 7. Pretty much for my sister and mom, it's been 2 years that my brother was shot. About 4:30, he bled out about 5:30. They were the first one there, and then they had to find me to make sure that they could get hands on me. But 2 years, 4th of July coming. The woman that was shot in Pecan Acres by another woman over a man, didn't neither one of them live in Pecan Acres. The guy that poured gas on the woman, said outside that neither one of them live in Pecan Acres. I went to the mayor and Mr. Camp, if you could y'all put a piece in the paper? It'll help mom cope with the loss of her son. And that just concerns me.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. All right, do we have anyone else wishing to make citizens' comments? Anyone else making citizens' comments? Ms. Isaac, okay. Yes, ma'am. Oh,
Take your
I'm
time.
not rushing you, just
Take your
making
time,
sure
Ms.
I'm
Isaac.
seeing you moving, so.
Hello to everybody,
Good evening.
to all my aldermen, but especially my one that's been here for so many years.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you for
Isaac.
the headache you have endured over the holidays.
Thank you. There have been plenty of them.
But I really have enjoyed having you as my alderman.
Thank you.
I really
Thank
have.
you.
And I enjoy having all of y'all now, I have to say that, I enjoy. So you said it's 1 year, so
Yes,
it's time
as
for
of today.
It's already time for raises for our department heads, right? Ain't it time for 'em?
Can we just do that?
Oh, okay, well, whenever you do it, just make sure you do it fast, cause we got one here, and this fireman that I would just like to say, they protect our city. We have had a lot going on in our city in the last few days, and I would just like to say, I know at different departments, you know, in different, places where people live, it's more crime on some than it is some, but we got to be fair for them all. Because when I pick up the newspaper, I don't see where somebody that died over in the new hotel. You don't see that, they hold it in. You know, it's something that's being held in. So we have to be real quiet about what we do and how we do stuff. But let's not discriminate. That's one thing I don't want to do, is discriminate against anybody. But another thing I would like to say, we're going into a lot right now. We're going into a lot that's going on here in our city. If we refuse to do things for our city, that's what I'm saying, for our city. We got to stay away from out there, we see the states out there taking care of their business. We got to do for our city, and I'm still saying, there's some inequality that's going on in the city. And I know y'all get tired of me saying, but I got to give you 3 minutes to come and say what I want to say. I want to say 10 minutes, but I didn't get it this time. I didn't call, feel like I got to have other people to get their opinions of different stuff. But I come up here to this board meeting, I came, all my life I almost looked back, and nothing has happened on my side of the town here, nothing. Nothing at all, it's just flat town, you just operate as please, but that's all right. One day we're gonna come through, we're gonna see a change. Water rates going up, Okay, we want better water. We do, and I think, being for that, I really do, I thank you, for getting all that together. But just remember, other parts of the town, we all need improvement, and we need to be in on the improvements also. But I just wanna say thank you. And then pay raises still coming, y'all, don't worry about it, I love y'all. They still coming, and then the new people we may get, Gary or who we get, I hope they get a good raise. I really do. Thank you all. Have a nice holiday.
Thank you,
Don't
Ms.
eat too
Isaac.
much barbecue.
You too. Thank you. All right, any other citizens' comments? Any other citizens' comments? All right, seeing none, we'll close it to citizen comments. And we have a public appearance by, Lemmy and, Jeffrey Rupp. If you would, that'd be great. I have a proclamation for y'all. So come tell us about, Lemonade Day.
Thank you, Mayor, Board. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Former Mayor. Yes, sir. You've
As
been
you
there
may
before.
know, the College of Business, Mark Castleberry, who did the mill, and Cadence Bank is sponsoring Lemonade Day on August 18th. It's a national program. The kids have to do a workbook. They get a backpack. They can go to the bank and get a microloan that is not legally binding, but if they don't have the resources to start their own lemonade stand. We launched this Saturday, even though it's not until the middle of August. We have almost 100 kids around the city signed up. And I would encourage you to encourage anyone to please participate. I'll be happy to get them any information that they need. Also, after they have sold their lemonade, we encourage them to do three things: spend some, feel what it's like to spend some of your money you've made, save some, and then share some. And what we're trying to do is create financial literacy, but also encourage them to start giving back to their community at an early age. So we'd like to see churches get engaged. My daughter, who looks a lot like a lemon, has decided to give back to the Humane Society. So at any rate, thank you for any support. I hope on the 18th of August you'll go out into your wards and spend some of that hard-earned cash on the kids in your neighborhood and watch them give it back. That's what we're trying to do. So thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely, and it's a wonderful, wonderful program, and you've also got a website. I mean, you can go on and Google Lemonade Day.
Lemonade.org, lemonadeday.org, absolutely.
And I have a proclamation, I won't read it, but I have a proclamation for you so that you can add that to your collection. Absolutely. Here, I'll hold it. All right, absolutely. Here, take the proclamation.
Thank you. I'll have a good forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay in character there. All right, that takes us to our first public hearing, which is the first public hearing and discussion of updating Chapter 62, Floods, Article 2, Flood Damage Prevention of the Code of Ordinances, City of Starkville, Mississippi, to meet Federal Emergency Management Agency FEMA 44 CRF requirements. And this is more of a housekeeping than anything. Mr. Sanders, do you have something you'd like to share, or if the board have any questions?
No, this is just a very minor update to our existing ordinance, per FEMA requirements to maintain our participation in the flood insurance program. There are 20 words and phrases that we had to update, such as 2 feet above full base water elevation, which we already had, referring to various flood maps and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Sanders, before I open it as a public hearing? No? All right, what I'll do is open it as a public hearing. We'll give opportunity for people to speak for or against. And in these, we usually do 15 minutes for a pro side and 15 minutes for a con side. And I can see everyone's ready and jumping forward to participate with this particular item. So I will open it as a public hearing. Do we have anyone who would like to speak on behalf or against these changes to this ordinance? Anyone at all? Anyone at all? All right, seeing none, I will close it as a public hearing. We will have our next public hearing for the next board meeting, and that will allow us to then adopt that ordinance, but that will be at the meeting on the 17th. The next thing we have up is a public hearing discussion of conditional use 18-02, a request for conditional use to allow for 5 mobile homes on Sand Road in Township Range 16-18 North, -14 East, and an R5 and C2 zone with a parcel number 105-16-002.00. Mr. Sanders, would you like to make that presentation? Mr. Clemens, are you gonna drive for him? Okay, all right. Okay.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Board of Aldermen, I have before you conditional use case 1802. Shamara Smith, Nikita Smith, K.S. Henderson, Tracy Baldwin, Shonda Henderson, on behalf of the Starkville Consolidated School District, are requesting conditional use to allow 5 mobile homes on Sand Road. The property is split zone C2 R5, and in order to place a mobile home, a conditional use is required per the City of Starkville permitted and conditional use chart. All leased areas are located along Sand Road and will have access to city, water, and electric services. All leased properties will have septic tanks or access to city sewer lines. On June 29th, 2018, the Planning and Zoning Commission met for a special call meeting to hold a public hearing on the request. 39 property owners of record within 300 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of the request. A public hearing notice was published in the Starkville Daily News on June 13th, and a sign was posted on the property concurrent with the publication of the notice. As of this date, the planning office has received 1 phone call requesting information and 1 phone call against the request. Staff has proposed 4 conditions, and these 4 conditions were made a recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission last Friday. 1, the applicant shall have 6 months from the conditional use approval to place a mobile home on the individual leased areas. The applicant shall provide documentation that all necessary permits, approval from the Mississippi State Department of Health for a septic system have been approved. All of the above conditions shall be fully and faithfully, Rashinda Henderson, lease number 528, is to provide a stamped site plan prepared by a licensed Mississippi surveyor illustrating that the site proposed placement of any structure will not encroach into any utility easement area. No structure under lease number 528 will be allowed to encroach onto any utility easement. Also, I should point out that Ms. Henderson in the Planning and Zoning Commission stated to the Planning and Zoning Commission that she will be asking the school board for a different location.
Okay, so she's going to change where she's going to be placing her mobile home?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And then the 4th condition is all above conditions shall be fully and faithfully executed, or the conditional use shall become null and void.
Okay.
I'll be happy to
Any
answer
questions?
any
Mr.
questions.
Sanders? Okay, seeing none, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the P and Z, what was their recommendation on that?
Recommendation of approval
Thank you.
with the 4 conditions.
Okay.
May I have one question?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders, on the staff report, it says Tracy Baldwin was going to provide those materials, but is it really Rashikwa Henderson?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, seeing no further discussion from the board, I'll open it as a public hearing. Again, it'll be 15 minutes for, 15 minutes against, and we will start with for. Do we have anyone wishing to speak to this matter? Anyone on behalf of? If you would come, when you come up, identify yourself, please, so that we will know who's speaking for the record. Oh, hi.
I'm Rashikwa Henderson.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I really would like for you guys to approve this home. This is my first home, a 2011 Riverbroach home, on that Sand Road for the 16 section land.
Okay, and you'll be finding a different location from the school board, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
It will still be on that road, but it's just a different spot.
Okay, all right, thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
All right.
Hi, my name is Kate Henderson. I already have my address for the mobile home site, and we haven't got our mobile home yet. We're just waiting to get approval first
Okay,
before we do anything.
all right, thank you. Do you
Let me
have a
say,
question? Question?
yeah, I was gonna say, that's very smart. Get approval, then get your mobile home. That's real smart. We wanna commend you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Observation.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hey.
My name is Shaneria Smith, and I'm a first-time owner on that. Well, that's going to be on Sand Road.
Okay, and you're asking for the board's approval, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, I'm Nikita Smith, and I'm asking for a school board approval. I have a mobile home, but it's in the trailer lot right now. I'm waiting for it to be approved so I can set it on my land.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
And my name is Chris Taylor, and I help these young ladies get all the paperwork properly submitted, because there's already 17 mobile homes on Sand Road. That's not counting Sand Hill Arms, which is, you count all those are mobile homes. So that's 100 and something there. So I really think they should be approved. They're trying to do something for themselves, and they're very young, and we need to help the people as much as we can. So I hope they get approved.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any questions from the board at this point? Okay, all right, we will, we'll offer the opposition a moment, so if y'all excuse me, unless there's someone else wishing to speak in favor. Okay, y'all only took 2 minutes, so we're good. All right, do we have anyone wishing to speak against this item? Anyone at all? All right, seeing none, I will close it as a public hearing. Any discussion from the board? Okay, seeing no discussion, do we have a motion?
Move
So
approval.
A motion for approval from Alderman Vaughn.
Second.
Second from Alderman Little. Further discussion? All right, hearing none, if you would, please answer yea or nay as the city clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver. Alderman Carver.
Yay.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Yay.
Alderman Little.
Yay.
Alderman Walker.
Yay.
Alderman Miller.
Yay.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
All right, by a vote of 7 to 0, the motion carries. All right, and we will go to one more public hearing, which is a public hearing consideration, and congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, first-time homeowners, that's great. Public hearing consideration of rezoning 18-03, request to rezone 4 parcels located at 701, 703, 705, and 707 North Montgomery Street from C2 to R5 with parcel number 108I-00-0002 and 108I-0201 and 0202 and 0203. So, Mr. Sanders, you're still there?
Yes, ma'am.
Please go ahead.
The applicant, James Flower, represented by Jason Pepper, is seeking a rezoning of 4 parcels located at 701, 703, 705, and 707 North Montgomery Street from C2 to R5, with parcels numbers being 108I-00-002.00, 108I-00-002.01, 108I-00-002.02, and 108I-00-02.03. The applicant is requesting the rezoning based on the manifest error in the ordinance or zoning map and a public need to correct the error. 17 property owners of record within 300 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of the request. A public hearing notice was published in the Starkville Daily News on June 15th, 2018, with a sign was posted on the properties concurrent with the publication of the notice. As of this date, the planning office has received no phone calls against this request. On June 12th, 2018, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted to recommend approval of the request from C2 to R5 due to error. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sanders. Do we have a history that's associated with how it ever got to C2 in the first place over there by Southern School?
No, ma'am, I do not. Sometime between 1982 and 1991, there was a rezoning.
Yeah. Okay. All right, do we have any questions of Mr. Sanders before I open it to the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, here's an opportunity for the public. We're gonna open it as a public hearing. Pro and con, I will start with pro. Anyone have any comments to make in regard or in favor of this particular rezoning request?
Applicants comes first.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Yes.
Jason Pepper, and just to answer your question, we researched and apparently it was just someone changed the color of the map.
Okay.
We couldn't find a rezoning for it.
That was it, Mr. Pepper? Okay, well, all right, well, thank you. So you would be in favor, is that correct?
I'm in favor.
All right, well, we will mark you as such. Do we have anyone else in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Okay, seeing none, anyone wishing to speak against this rezoning? All right, seeing none, I will close it as a public hearing. Any questions at this point from the board? Do we have a motion? Oh, Alderman Walker, please.
I'll be happy to make a motion, but I would like to ask first, Mr. Pepper, if you're here representing the applicant, if we go from C2 to R5, one of the uses that is a conditional use in R5 is mobile home. Would you be willing to waive that mobile home as a use?
Absolutely.
So how do I need to form that in the phrase of a motion?
Approving the rezoning based on a finding of error with the condition that the property will not be used for mobile homes.
What he said?
What he said. So
Okay.
moved.
I have a motion that
Second.
the property be rezoned with a finding of manifest error and it won't be used for mobile homes. So, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Alderman Little. All right, further discussion? Any discussion? All right, hearing none. If you would answer yea or nay as the city clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver. Alderman Carver.
Alderman Carver, are you still with us?
Yes, ma'am. Signal's not good. Jay?
Yes. Okay, that was a vote in favor of.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Yay.
Alderman Little.
Yay.
Alderman Walker.
Yay.
Alderman Miller.
Yay.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
All right, by unanimous vote of 7, that motion carries, and that completes our public hearing requirements for this meeting. Thank you. All right, under Mayor's business, we have discussion of the sewer and water rate changes for the purpose of replacing our existing infrastructure in the city of Starkville, and also, which I didn't put in there in my language for this particular item, repairing the lagoon and the associated equipment necessary for its replacement or its repair, restructure. So we had a presentation at the work session, and Dr. Barrett is here again. I lost him. He's in the back. If you wouldn't mind, I think there may be some questions, and Joel is going to pull up. You have his information to pull up, Joel? Yes, ma'am. Okay. And I know Alderman Sistrunk has done some work on just running numbers as to how this would lay out. We looked at several structures. One of the things that we do now is our water rates start at 0 and go to 1,000, 0 to 1,000. The first 0 to 1,000, you have a flat rate of $7.50 for water and sewer, and then it's $2.26 per 1,000. And so after that, it incrementally goes up, and then it's $2.26 on up after that. But the flat rate applies to the 0 to 1,000. So part of what we discussed was taking that initial rate of 0 to 1,000 and leaving that at 0 in terms of usage, leaving that flat rate in place, and then not having water usage at $2.26 per 1,000 start until you get to 1,000, if that makes sense. I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not sure it's coming across right. So that was one of the elements of discussion. We ran some numbers. Dr. Barrett had a formula, and formula is the right thing to call it, where we plug those numbers in to see what we need. Mr. Kemp is here for our purposes of, I see you, Vice Mayor, but I'm going to keep the floor for a few minutes. Mr. Kemp is here to share with us the need for the lagoon and the equipment associated with it, as well as the plan to replace infrastructure throughout the city beginning First with Pleasant Acres, secondly with Green Oaks in phases, and thirdly with Rolling Hills, where our greatest needs are, staggered based on the requirements of our repair work that we have documented over the number of years. So each one of our infrastructures in some of these subdivisions are reaching their useful life of 50 and 60 years. So hopefully when we make a wholesale replacement, we will replace it to the extent it'll last 100 years because of the new techniques and new equipment and new parts. Plastic, the plastic PVC pipe will last longer. So, and so we have both of these gentlemen who are kind enough, well, Mr. Kemp has to be here, but Dr. Barrett was kind enough to come back and answer any questions that might be percolating from this particular presentation. So, all right, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Kemp, would you and Mr. Barrett come forward, please? Let me just briefly say, before I'm interested in hearing about rate increases, I'd like to hear something about the need for rate increases. Mr. Kemp, I have not seen any data on it. I just read in the paper, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that approximately $600,000 is needed for Pleasant Acres, and maybe about $2.4 million is needed for Green Oaks, and about $900,000 is needed for Rolling Hills. And I think I saw a quote, if that's correct, not a good way to get information, but I'm trying to gather information in the best manner as possible. I think the budget chair may have been quoted in the paper saying that that the existing revenue stream would allow us to be able to do the needed repairs for Pleasant Acres. I know back in the 2005-2009 term, when the gentleman from 3, Alderman McLaurin, was here, I think Alderman Cox was from 5. There was some increases in rate then. I think at that time, then that's when that user rate came in effect, Mr. Kemp, for those persons who are in a leasehold interest, a landlord and tenant, including those who utilizing rental properties. And I know the big picture is also the city of Starkville has expanded our infrastructure to allow non-city residents such as rural water associations to utilize our existing water structure. So I think when we look at the matter of rates, we need to make sure, just like taxes, what type of taxes, if any tax increase, would you utilize or impose to make it equitable. So I think we need to look at the big picture of, are we, the city, charging a fair and equitable rate to the non-city residents who are also putting a great strain and use and burden on our system? I mean, what rate, if any, is fair and just and proper? We also need to look at what legal avenue, if any, we can utilize, if any, the $1 million that was just mentioned to the board at a recent meeting for these improvements. And also, if there is an increase, how much money is going to be generated and when will it be generated? Is there any urgent need to increase rates? Normally when the matter of tax increases and rate increases come up, I'm so accustomed over 25 years hearing, well, just a dollar here, a dollar there. But the people that I represent, always tell me that a dollar is important to them because they have to work hard for it. I represent constituents that are not fortunate to have the $100,000 a year jobs at Mississippi State, at Yokohama, PACCAR, and these other places. I represent a lot of people who are struggling to make minimum wage income. I represent a lot of people who are elderly. I represent a lot of people who are struggling to make things meet. And of course, the other side going to say, well, we got to have good water rates and in order to have good infrastructure system. But I think we need to look at this very carefully. There's only been one session, a work session. I do want to hear from Mr. Barrett. This is a very important question. And Mr. Kemp, I think, in conversation with you that, certainly, that if, the board, I think one option would be that, the board always can just operate within existing revenue stream, just do Pleasant Acres now, just like we do with the capital improvements. We know we only use about $500 or plus $1,000 a year for street overlay, and once we use that up, then if the street's about to erode, then we just don't repair it. We have a lot of drainage issues. I mean, do we raise the rates to fix drainage? It's just a matter of what the board prioritizes. So I have not heard anything, and that's why I want to hear what's so urgent, necessitous right now. Of course, repairing water lines is always going to be an issue. I mean, repairing streets is an issue. We have drainage issue. We have sewer issues. We have a lot of needs that we have not met yet from the 1998 annexation. So, I think we need to make a very strong prima facie case to show that we need these rates. I mean, we always roll out figures, well, $1 here, $2 here, that is okay for some, but I got constituents who cannot afford it, and I'm very sensitive to their needs and their concerns, and I want to make sure that it's addressed, but at the same time I want to look at the big picture. So I think the proponents will say, well, we have aging infrastructure, but let's look at the big picture, because over the years I've seen how we're taking in water association. Just a few weeks ago we took in a water association going out to the southeastern part of the city. So we're taking a lot of water associations. So I think what we're going to need to do, it'd be good we have a comprehensive study on this so we'll know, and maybe y'all have done that. I'm just laying some preliminary comments out so we'll know. I mean, if you're going to look at a water rate increase, just like a tax structure, what are we doing in the big scheme of things? What are we charging these rural water associations? How are we assessing them this? I mean, if everybody's going to utilize our water system, then it should be a equitable and a just and a fair system. So we don't need to be just increasing it to say we're going to do that. That's what happened in 2005, 2009. They put their user fee on there, and then they increased that rate to $7.50 per 1,000 gallons. Is that right, Mr. Kemp? With that money to be earmarked at that time, when in that 2005-9 term, that it'll be earmarked to help deal with the maintenance upkeep of these aging water lines. And the question is, how much money is into that fund? Have we been using that fund? I mean, what resources and monies do we have available in that enterprise fund? We need to have that big picture. I mean, because I would think, have we been dipping into it that very strenuously? I mean, what kind of money we got? So, when we talk about rate increase, let's not do it unless there's a real urgent and necessitous, because when you talk about a rate increase, in my opinion, there's a form of a tax increase. And, and there are a lot of hard-working constituents in my district, I'm sure, throughout the city that, every dollar counts. People are trying to live and, make a living. The utility bills are real high because of the need. It's given the weather every day is 100 degrees plus the humidity index. They trying to pay these bills. They're calling, asking for extensions to your office, and so we need to look at the big picture. I know this is an agenda item tonight, but I'd like to hear from you, and I don't want to rush through this because it's an important question. I wasn't at the work session. Matter of fact, Friday I wasn't even in the city of Stark, about 3 hours away from here. So, but I like to hear the presentation from Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, I want to hear what you got to say, Mr. Kemp got to say, and I want all those questions addressed before we make this decision. In other words, this takes time. We can't just roll through this and come here and be so moving second. I know tomorrow's the 4th, but if the board don't have time to discuss it, we need to take it off the agenda and have another meeting. But since it's on the agenda, we need to hear that. So, Mr. Barrett, I'd like to hear your presentation. I have not heard it. This is an important question because if this rate increase goes, it's not going to roll back. And I have never seen a rate increase roll back. So, Mayor, I still have the floor, and I'll announce when I'm done. So, Mr. Barrett, will you come and tell me what information you have that you share with the board, and Mr. Kemp, whatever order y'all want. I just want to get some evidence on what we're doing.
If y'all want me to go back through that presentation, I've got some printed handouts, plus I can roll through it
visually would like.
I want to hear, I want to hear everything you got to say, Mr. You asked me a question. I have the floor right now.
You have, but I would like him to pass those handouts.
Yeah, and Mayor, let me finish. Mr. Barrett, I wasn't there. I want to hear your presentation. I want to make sure I get all the evidence. I want to make the decision. I was not at the work session. I want you to take your time, go through it. I want to hear it.
Sure, will do. Will I be?
And Mr. Barrett, when you finish, and Mr. Kemp answered my question, I'm going to yield the floor at that point. So I still have the floor until y'all finish and Mr. Kemp finish, and I'll announce to the chair when I get through.
Okay, as Vice Mayor said, there was only a couple of y'all that weren't there when we actually had the work session that we went through this the first time to talk about it. So I guess for the sake of repetition, for those of y'all that have heard it, I'll just go through it very similar as I did previous time. First of all, y'all actually made a board request to get me to look at your rates, look at the city of Starkville itself, as well as look at where Starkville fits within some of these similar sized cities across the state. And I will say this before I go into that part. Regardless of what you all look like compared to other cities, you really need to concern yourself with Starkville. What does Starkville need to be doing? What are the conditions of Starkville's water and sewer system? What are the conditions of Starkville's water and sewer infrastructure? So the assumption that we make when we take other similar sized and classification cities is that on average, by looking at multiple cities, we're going to make the assumption that they had gone through these same things, these same moves, and have over time adjusted rates accordingly to meet those financial needs. So we're just making some assumptions when we look at those. And I'll let you know once we start looking at some different cities. But to start, what we'll look at is your actual consumption. And these are the city of Starkville's actual customers, billable customers. We have an entire year worth of consumption data, so we know who is using what over that course of time. And we do that so that we have a full 12 months, kind of a usage cycle of customers. And we're going to look at water and sewer, and then we'll look at some utility comparisons. So to begin with, and for the sake of knowing I guess some scenarios that Alderman Sistrunk put out, I may just make some points while we've got these consumption numbers up. If you noticed, Alderman Sistrunk and the mayor talked about, because as of right now, if you just have an active water meter and you get sewer collected from your home, you can be charged $7.50. That's $4 for water, $3.50 for sewer. That's just for an active meter. You haven't used anything yet. The mayor's and Alderman Sistrunk, their proposal, and these are just, I guess, a discussion, thoughts for discussion, is leaving that base at 4, but having, instead of just 0 and just an active meter, moving it to 1,000 gallons. So essentially, almost 30% of your customer base, they would actually see a decrease in their rate. And I ran it a little more this afternoon. Somebody's got to be almost at 3,000 gallons before they're actually going to see an increase in their rate. And I even did it for myself. We use typically somewhere between 8,000 and 11,000. Our water bill would go up somewhere about $4 to $6 a month. And my wife and I talked about it today. So again, I'm not immune to it. For one, I live here, and I tell you, one thing to realize is doing this in multiple cities across the state. I've tried to look at this very objectively and unbiased, even though I live in Starkville. And I made the point the other day in the work session. I've looked at y'all just like I've looked at any other city and have tried to be straightforward and objective about it. But looking at your consumption numbers here, and Vice Mayor Perkins, one thing you may realize here, if we start looking if I'm telling you, and based on the proposed rates, that about 40% of the customer base would either see no change in their rate, or they would have a decreased rate, that's gonna hit these people that are using 0 to 2,000 gallons. So essentially, maybe your single-family homes, older people that would be using less water. So we have true consumption numbers here, so we can see that. Okay, moving forward, this consumption breakdown, as you can see, the 0 to 2,000 makes up about 43% of the customer base of Starkville, and about 31% make up your 2,000 to 5,000. And I explained the other day, where I get 5,000, and again, that's just a rough, it's an even number, 5,000, because we base water consumption and sewer collection on thousands of gallons. But 5,000, if you consider a household of 2.5 people, 2.5, which is kind of a state average, times 65 gallons per day, times a 30 or 31 day billing cycle, you get about 5,000 gallons. So that's just an average consumption, it's an average breaking point. So we see that 73, 74% of our customer base is using less than 5,000 gallons. All right, now that's just consumption. Now, based on our current use, you're also seeing those 0 to 2,000 folks, they're only using about 4% of our water. Now, looking at it graphically, you can see that same percentage over here, that's 43% of customers, those 43% are only using 4% of our water. Okay, now let's talk about dollars. The 0 to 1,000 people, they're only paying in, or they are paying in about 10%. Now, of course, if you actually change your rate structure as you are proposing, these numbers would change. And this is I would tell you, a key to kind of hang on to. When it comes to water and sewer, there are actually two components at play there: rates and rate structure. Like our structure would be changing that base from a 0 to 1,000, and then the rate would be if you changed it from 226 to some other number. So, okay. Again, graphically looking at the same breakdown. Now, this is where you really start seeing the discrepancies or disparities. This 0 to 1,000, you see it makes up 29% of your base. They're using just a little over 1% of your water, and they're paying 10% into your fund, into your enterprise fund. And here it's explained graphically. So your 0 to 2,000 people make up about 43% of your customer base. They use about 4% of your water, paying about 16% into your fund. So you're starting to see the way your current rate and rate structure affect your consumption, your customer base, and your enterprise fund. Not that there's anything wrong with this. This is just the breakdown. Again, this is a similar trend that you see. Okay, this gets still into what y'all currently have. Your water base is $4, your variable is $2.26. Okay, now what we've done here, again, as the mayor was saying, formula, I really just built an Excel spreadsheet that allows y'all to adjust your rate or your rate structure to see anticipated revenue generated. Okay, so given the same customer base, and if you had another year that mirrored what we looked at, if your customers did not change, didn't increase or decrease, and everybody that's currently on the rolls used the same amount of water, if you increased your base rate $1, you could look to annually generate about $124,000. If you increased your water variable rate, that $2.26, if you took it up to $2.51, you would generate a little over $2.73. Then with your outside, again, y'all do have a different rate for a small group of citizens that are outside the city limits. You're at $4, then $3.39 1,000. So your base rate is the same. Your variable, the per thousand, is a little bit higher. And again, that's a small fraction of your customer base. And actually, the way we built this, there were two different codes. One of them we couldn't really break it out, or I'm gonna say I couldn't necessarily break it out as cleanly. So I left those in the city. So what you're gonna see here is a very conservative estimate of dollars generated if you kept their rate the same and didn't adjust it up or down, and you just moved it $1 or a quarter. So again, it's a very small group, and again, this is a very conservative estimate. Okay, so those were y'all's numbers, just looking at the city of Starkville. Currently what you have, if we adjusted anything up or down. All right, this is where we get into comparing you all with some other cities. Ridgeland, Vicksburg, Pearl, Brandon. So we're going to look at the base rate. So here, as you can see, you have $3, $10.06, $12.12, $6.02. So the average of that is $7.04 for a base. So as you can see, based on our $4 base fee, we're 43% below that average. And then going with our per thousand, we're at $2.26. Again, same towns, their variable rate. The only ones lower are Ridgeland and Brandon. As you can see from that, the average $2.92. So again, we're 22% below average. And then when we look at 5,000 gallons, again, this is somewhat of an average household. The only people that are less are Ridgeland. That average is $17.51. Again, we're 12%, 12.6% below average. So you see we're below average on our base, our variable, and our 5,000 charge. Dealing with sewer. Sewer is a little bit lower on the base. It's at $3.50. So the $4 and the $3.50 are what make up that $7.50 that most people see as a base fee. Same variable, $2.26. You will notice that those numbers look very similar, but they're going to be a little bit less than your water because we don't, from everything I've seen in the consumption numbers, we don't serve sewer or collect sewer from all the water customers. So that revenue is going to be a little bit lower. But one thing I would point out is notice that just your base dollar increase only generates about $123,000, whereas your variable quarter generates twice as much as that because you're actually touching the usage. So the people that are using more water would be paying into these funds. Okay, this is when we get into sewer. Again, same cities, same structure. So we're looking at the fixed base, Ridgeland, Vicksburg, Pearl, Brandon, $1, $16.10, $18.31, $9.54, and we're at $3.50. So again, $9.69 is that average. So we're 63% below average. And then with the variable, as you're seeing here, $3.64, $4.96, $6.32, $7. We're at $2.26. So based on that average, $4.84, we're 53% below average. And I would say this: all of these utilities, it's becoming clearer and clearer, and we're seeing it in more and more situations. People are realizing it's very expensive to collect, treat, and discharge wastewater. It's getting to the point where it's more expensive per thousand than water to pump, treat, and distribute. So wastewater is getting to be an expensive utility. Okay, 44 with 53% below average there. Per 5,000, again, same scenario. You see where everybody is. We're at 1480. So 2809 is that average. We're 47.3% below average of those comparable cities. Now, one thing I did, which I like to see, because a lot of customers, whether they realize it or not, and I even hear it, people will talk about my water bill is this price, not thinking that that also included electricity, sewer, garbage pickup. But when you really start breaking it down, so I really like to put these together. This is a water and sewer bill. So if somebody used 5,000 gallons of water, this is what their bill would look like for water and sewer combined. Again, we are the lowest. The average of that is 45.60, so we're about 33%, almost 34% below average for those comparable cities. Okay, moving into, and this is kind of the tail end, and I've adjusted this only slightly because if y'all remember, I really brought out 3 points last time. Let's look at the enterprise fund, let's look at depreciation, and then possible future needs. I kind of pulled that future needs off because that's something, the decision y'all will make. So these are real numbers that I pulled off of y'all's audits that are online that Watkins Ward staff have prepared. So FY17, again, not exactly sure where these capital grants and contributions came from, but minus that, y'all lost money FY17. Go into 16, again, not sure where the capital grants contributions came from. Sometimes you'll see municipalities pull from other funds, maybe general funds, to kind of make up deficits. I'm not saying that's what happened or where the money came from, but if you simply look at it, revenue and expenses, in FY16, you lost money again there. over 300,000. FY15, I only went back 3 years. You lost $1.2 million there. So just from looking at Watkins, Ward, and Stafford city audits that are on y'all's website, y'all have lost money 3 years in a row on water and sewer enterprise funds. Okay, now looking at depreciation, again, pull these from these same audits at Watkins, Ward, and Stafford, and you can see a similar trend here of about $1.2, $1.3 million a year. Now, I do know, again, I'm not an accountant and I don't claim to be an accountant, but from a depreciation standpoint, I mean, we can realistically think about water and wastewater infrastructure and assets needing to be replaced at some point in time. There's very little, if anything, that you put in place or put in action for a water and wastewater system that will last you forever. The pipes wear out, the pumps wear out, things do wear out. So it's very important to be conscious of that. And you're seeing it right here fairly consistently that the value of y'all's assets every year is, I'm going to say, declining by $1.2 million. So if you simply wanted to invest back in to keep our system up to a certain level, you would need to be putting in about that amount of money, about $1.2, $1.3 million a year. Okay, now this is where I touched on, I kind of grabbed something I saw in the Mississippi Magazine about the best place to live. But again, y'all's future demands, that depends on y'all and what y'all want to do. Again, that's not my decision to be made. I'm just showing you what I have found and what I've gotten from y'all city for y'all to look at.
May I yield?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Barrett. I do appreciate you making that twice, and I particularly appreciate you putting in the best place to live.
Hey,
because I just mentioned that in Mayor's comments, and I shouldn't have.
I just saw it, so I pulled it.
We were voted by Mississippi Magazine the best city to live in the state of Mississippi. So we are honored by that and delighted that you put that in there. So, all right.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett.
Alderman Miller, I see you leaning forward. Did you?
May I be recognized?
Yes, you may.
I have a question for Dr. Barrett. Dr. Barrett, I asked you this on Friday, and I just want to be clear. So when we're looking at what I would call I'm going to call it a burden of cost, and what you just presented, we're talking about, in a sense, there would be a benefit to the lower socioeconomic folks, the elderly, and the single-family homes, and the fact that in the current structure we're looking at right now, we would be essentially moving, again, I'm going to use the word burden of cost for our infrastructure to those who use more water. And in fact, for those who use 0 to 1,000, the cost would essentially remain the same, if not be less. Is that correct?
I feel like you have a couple of questions there. First one, the folks from 0 to 1,000, their rate will actually go down. Break even is somewhere around 2,500. So anybody from 1,000 to 2,500 is either going to pay from 0 to about 2,500 is either going to pay less or the same. It's not till you start getting over that when you start actually paying more. So if you want to make the assumption that your lower socioeconomics are going to use less water, which we do see, yes, you can clearly say that about 30 to 40% of y'all's customer base will either have a lower rate or the same rate, and not see a change.
Okay. Thank you.
Even with the rate increases as
Thank you.
proposed.
Right, if the rate increase, and has that been made clear?
Well,
What your
I'm headed there. I'll recognize Alderman Sister. Alderman Miller, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break y'all.
No, I yield, Mayor.
You done? Okay, thank you. Alderman Sister.
And I took Dr. Barrett's worksheet and a sample of customers to see what this would impact, what the impact would be to some actual real people with their real bills. And I have a proposal down there in the lower left-hand corner that you can see. And with moving that yes, I just passed it out. With moving that variable rate to start billing at 1,000 gallons, you can see that first customer is actually who's an elderly single woman, and you'll see that her bill actually goes down. And there are two proposals up there, which is going to be a different discussion. But for a single person using a limited amount of water, their bill is likely to go down. As Dr. Barrett said, the break-even point probably comes in around 2,500 to 3,000 gallons. The two-person family that's in there, that's my bill. and it would raise my rates by, if we do the full increase that I think we should do, less than $2 a month. As you go to a 5-person family, theirs goes up maybe as much as $5 a month or so. I looked at a small business, a medical office, to see what the impact would be to them, and that's around $5 a month as well. I looked at probably one of our very biggest users of water, and that's Oktibbeha County Hospital. They're open 24/7. They're doing laundry. They're doing cooking and cleaning and patient cares. They are a high volume user of water, and you'll see what the impact is to them. So we have.
Alderman Sistrunk?
Yes.
What was it for the hospital? What was that figure?
It's less than $3,000 a month.
Okay, thank you.
And there are two components up there. One was if we only, and I don't mean to be stealing Mr. Kemp's thunder, but we have several things going on. We finished the year, fiscal year 17, with $600,000 in cash in the water and sewer fund. We are not growing that number by any means. So we can say that's a reasonable amount for us to assume that we have to work with. Once we've spent that, we've spent it. It's depleted and gone, and until we replace it, we have no margin for error, because as Dr. Barrett pointed out, we are functioning at a loss. Last year was as close to a break-even point as we had, but generally we're functioning at a loss. We have several things rolling our way. If we get the $1 million grant, if we're able to move forward with that and use it for appropriate purposes, we've got to have $250,000 to match that. We want to begin a wholesale, or we've indicated that we want to begin a wholesale improvement of our infrastructure. Pleasant Acres would be $600,000, so that would be the first thing there. We have some cap loans, which is probably part of what you saw that balanced our budget in previous years. We have some cap loans which are about to come due, and we'll have debt service due on those. So time to pay the piper for having borrowed money. We have a lagoon that is near capacity and that will require plant upgrades to go along with the expansion or rework of the lagoon. That's a pretty significant project that's going to require bonds, I believe, to finance that. Mr. Kemp has told me that we're looking probably at about a $7.5 million project, because these would be financed with revenue bonds, which typically come at a slightly higher interest rate than general obligation bonds, and because those revenue bonds will require a bond sinking fund. Y'all don't glaze over just yet. They're a little more expensive in terms of borrowing, and we're going to need probably about $800,000 a year to do debt service on the lagoon. Those are things that push us to that $1.2 million, $1.3 million, or an even higher number that we need to generate annually in order to be able to continue our current operations and make improvements to 50-year-old infrastructure that will, if it doesn't fail this year, it will fail in the very near term. What I'm proposing, based on Dr. Barrett's good work and the other information that I've been able to gather, is that we normalize our rates across the city. We do have some people outside the city limits who've been paying a little bit more, but if you remember the slide that dealt with those people outside the city, it's less than $500. So it's really not something that it's tedious to keep up with, and it doesn't really benefit us. So I would propose that we leave our base water rate at $4. We leave our we increase our base sewer rate to $4, and that we restructure how we bill so that the first 1,000 gallons are covered in that base rate, and we begin billing for every gallon, every kilogallon after that point. I would also recommend that we take that variable rate per kilogallon, per 1,000 gallons, up to $3.25. That's that second bracketed thing that you see on your spreadsheet there, and the impact to individual families there, or sample families there. That would generate the $800,000 that we'll need for our lagoon and plant upgrades there, and give us about $965,000 a year for additional improvements to our water and sewer system. It will impact about 50% of our customers in terms of increase in our rates. Most people will see the same or less in terms of their water and sewer bill, but it positions us to take care of the things that we need to take care of. The example those of us that are not in the industry tend to use is it's like the roof of your house. You can only delay that sort of maintenance so long without it costing you more to make those repairs later, because you've incurred additional things that you're going to have to deal with. And we're on the cusp of that, and this would allow us to get in front of that. And I yield.
All right, thank you. Alderman Little.
Dr. Barrett, I commend you for your presentations. Very easy to follow and had a lot of good information, and I appreciate that. And Alderman Sistrunk, I appreciate your time and effort you put into this and your numbers that you gathered. It's some good information. Mr. Kemp, as far as the lagoon, I understand that to be the most pressing issue in the immediate future. I know Mr. Devlin had mentioned that early in my tenure on the board last term, that it was going to be at capacity in the next 2 to 3 years, and I think we're at that crossroad, and it's going to need attention. I see this as potentially, if we fail to act, being a public health nightmare in a crisis situation. And under our current rates, as Dr. Barrett just pointed out, I don't see it being sustainable. And I like the board's direction and the mayor's direction here of being proactive as opposed to being reactive. Because it's like Alderman Sistrunk pointed out, if we let our roof go unchecked, it's just going to become more expensive. And this is not a glamorous topic or anything that people get excited about like you do parks, Gary. You know, we get excited when we talk about something like that we can see, touch, and feel, but we don't see these assets below the surface of the roads and, you know, in the right-of-ways every day, and until we have a ruptured water line that's running across or spewing up in someone's yard, or you have to dig across somebody's yard to fix one because it's 60 years old and it's gone unchecked. I just feel like this is something that we need to address. Fortunately, down in my ward, I don't see a lot of digging have to go on. We did have a major crisis, or could a potential crisis with the force main project we had to spend $1 million on last year that received a lot of MSU's sewage that passes through that area, but and that's been taken care of. But a lot of that's newer homes and construction down there, so that'll probably be at the tail end of this project as it loops back around. But one day that area will also be old, so we'll all be contributing to help other areas that, you know, the Green Oaks and Pleasant Acres and Rolling Hills and other areas that need attention here in the near future. And this is a project that we're going to be starting now. It's going to go on long after this board's gone, long after Mr. Kemp's retired and enjoying his later years, and long after the rest of us have moved on from this table. So I think it's something that we all need to get behind, and we would be somewhat derelict in our duties if we did not address this going forward. I think I see it being a positive for elderly and lower income folks with getting some relief on their bills, and then being based on usage. Those higher usage will be charged a little more. So I'm going to be supportive of this going forward tonight. I see this as being very positive. Thank you. How you?
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Walker, I'm going to call on you, and then I'm going to see if Alderman Carver might
Go
like to
ahead,
say
you
something.
can
No, that's okay. No, go ahead, Alderman Walker.
I just want to, again, thank you, Dr. Barrett, for coming and giving the presentation. It really helps to put in perspective where things are. It helps to make that audit feel a little more real while we're doing it. I think we've all seen it. I know I've get, like everyone else, we get phone calls all the time about water line broken or sewage running across property, and we know we're having to fix that. And we know, I mean, we all know that we have aging infrastructure and that it has to be fixed, and it costs real money to do that. I'm also think it's good for us to be conscious of how does this affect people. And I'm certainly willing to change that structure to not charge for that first 1,000 gallons to be included in that base fee. I think is a reasonable way to do that, and I can support that. I think the other thing that we've been very fortunate to be able to do over the last years, and you saw in those audits, is the ability of to get grants to help us put some Band-Aids on problems that we know we've had, whether that was the EPA issues or others. And I still think that this is going to allow us to do more. I'd like to be able to see now this $1 million worth of sewage, be able to use, obviously, some of that for matching grants to maybe be able to do $1.5 or $2 million a year. So I think it gives us the flexibility to have that money for matching grants, but now we're not solely relying on, if we don't get that grant, we're not going to have any infrastructure improvement for that year. We can no longer play that game, in my opinion. We have to get it fixed. And when it comes right down to it, this is economic development. If you want people to come live in your town, if you don't have the basic amenities, basic services that they're going to come to expect when they turn the faucet on or when they flush the toilet, then they're going to choose to live somewhere else if they have a choice. We have to invest in our infrastructure. And I believe that this is a prudent, practical approach to be able to do that, that's going to allow us over the next decade or so to really have drastic improvements overall throughout our system. But we'll begin to see it immediately, hopefully starting this later year in the first neighborhood at Pleasant Acres, which I know those folks will appreciate, and that might be a few less calls I get, because I get them all the time, because the infrastructure there is not functioning like we need it to. And so I believe this is a huge step in the right direction.
Thank you, Alderman Walker. Alderman Carver, can you hear?
Yes, ma'am. I was going to say, on this subject, when it started, we had a meeting at the Sportsplex conducted by myself and the mayor and Mr. Kemp, and we took that and we did a next door thread, and I would say there were roughly, you can look at it, maybe 60 to 70 comments. And what was interesting about this topic is overwhelmingly 95% or more of the people who support this. When you speak of quality of water, you literally speak of quality of life. And what I noticed also was in the neighborhood of Green Oaks is that people didn't feel that it was safe to drink the water. So just from the savings alone of not having to buy bottled water, and in the people's mind, it stands out with this subject. Secondly, what you're going to see is you're going to see the water crews over time, in my opinion, over time, 4 or 5 years into it, let's say an example of having 20 to 25 water leaks, maybe in a week, is you're going to have faster response. Those crews, as the numbers dwindle down, as the pipes and lines are replaced, you're going to see faster response, and it's just going to help those crews out. And then thirdly, I would say, and this may be leading into Mr. Kemp, and the question for him is, do you see these rates being sufficiently? And secondly, you and I have spoken, anything we can do to minimally just disturb people's yards and property. We spoke about that. We spoke about the boring process. So that's all coming. But Mr. Kemp, if he's there, can he just, give maybe a quick thought on this rate, his opinion on this rate and the structure?
Okay, thank you. He'll do that now, Alderman Carver.
He's talking about after the fact, is making sure.
The rates and the structure, and then making sure that the lines, we are sensitive to the people's lines of where they go when we redo them.
That's exactly right. We'll be working with the communities. We're going to be doing engineering studies to optimize how we redo this, but we'll be working with those customers clearly. In certain areas, there's more focused in backyards. It's going to be a lot more obstructions to that, but we realize that it's going to be a little bit slower process. But I think as we entered into this thing, we want to communicate very well up front after we get our plan together, and then we want to make sure when we leave, we're as close to what it was when we got there. Of course, you disturb a lot of ground, but that's part of it as well. But that would be our approach, and I think that's what the Alderman was asking.
Is that what you asked, Alderman Carver? Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, that's sufficient. Also, I'd like to also thank Dr. Jason Barrett in that department. Sometimes we forget the great asset we've got right in our backyard, and thank you, Dr. Barrett.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Alderman Vaughn.
All we have to do is just, I got one comment. All we have to think about when we went to Middle Wisdom Conference in Jackson last year, we were served bottled water because everything was just a mess.
Everywhere we went, we were serving bottled water. All we got to just think about what we went through in Jackson.
Right. And I think that's our effort to forestall that. So, okay, I'm sorry, Alderman Sistrum.
And I have a question for Mr. Kemp too, and it is this going to be sufficient to allow you some time to get these projects started and move forward with the things that you need to move forward with? And then I would like to encourage the board we've seen a history of our rate increases over time. I would encourage us not to find, if at all possible, not to find ourselves in the position again of having to do a larger increase at one time. I think it would behoove us to do these things incrementally. It just allows everybody to adjust to them more if we do these things incrementally. But we are at a point where we have no real choices, I don't think.
No, I think you're right. I think it's been said here tonight. We've got to do something, and we've really got it broken into two areas. One is the treatment plant, which is a huge asset when it's functioning just because of the volume that we can handle for growth. But our collection and distribution systems are old, and it's over half of the city really needs replacement. That goes back to the thing. This is a project that's going to start, and it's going to take many years till we really get that together. And I think as we continue to grow outside, I think we don't lose sight of, we're installing those products outside in the new developments so that those are more matching with what we would like to do in the older neighborhood sections of town. I think the way you've laid this out really gets a good start in that way. As we said earlier, we've got a little bit of dollars in our fund, but we need a reserve, I think, and I appreciate your comments on that because you just need to have some in there for emergencies, and they always happen. But right here, we're getting close to $1 million. That would be an excellent start, I think, to try to address it. And as the Vice Mayor said, the numbers he used is the best engineering numbers that we have today. That gives the 3 targets, which is where we're getting a lot of calls. There's a lot of area in Starkville that's got to be addressed, but those are in pockets is how we go forward for us, implementing the program.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. Okay, Alderman Vaughn, were you, okay. All right, one of the things I want to say is that I am very, very proud of this board that they are looking forward. I think that differentiates us from almost any other city in the state of Mississippi, and I don't mean to call anybody else out from any other cities in Mississippi, but I think this is a very positive and prudent thing for us to do. I think from Dr. Barrett's numbers, it shows that we are well under most cities in terms of what we charge, and water is a massive asset. I mean, that's one of the things that makes our city different, or makes us the best that we can be is to provide good, clean water that our residents want to drink, and we don't hear any more groundwater discussions, and we don't have any more pipes that create issues. It's going to be a long haul, but I think that this is probably as good, as important a thing as this board will undertake and get done, and I'm just delighted that y'all are willing to take it up and go forward with it. So, I'm sorry, anyone else? Alderman Sister?
Mayor?
See you. I'm sorry, Alderman Carver? Go ahead.
I would just have a simple request for the board and the mayor. With this, sometimes when we get any kind of allocation of funds, we may divide it by a seventh with each ward receiving equal amounts. With this, I would like to see a list created by Mr. Kemp's department and stuck to it. And I've heard Pleasant Acres, and I've heard Green Oaks, and whatever is number 3 and 4 and 5. But I think much like how we do sometimes the patchwork and we bounce around the city, I don't think that's probably the most relevant with this rate increase, but mainly to get on that list and stay on that list and to do big block areas. And if there's, that we can have some kind of quantitative, we can look back in a couple of years and say we have to knock these big 5 out. And so that was what I was saying, maybe requesting more to not have the politics involved and have that department derive the list and just to stick to it. And I think that's the best way to approach this. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Carver, and I think that's what Mr. Kemp has done, is he's looked at the numbers that we've had to generate in order to go meet the needs of sewer line breaks and water breaks, and I think Pleasant Acres rises to the top. I think Green Oaks was second and Rolling Hills was third, and so I think that's how he arrived at those numbers. I don't anticipate we'll have any massive changes unless the earth shakes and perhaps we have some other lines that break somewhere. But at this point in time, I think he's derived those numbers from his repair list, actually, so, okay. Did you have something you want to say, Mr. Campbell?
I was gonna just say that's exactly the way we approached it, is to kind of look at where the calls are, where there's really beginning to see failure. These are neighborhoods, we try to do that, and that's an economic scale, to try to reel the project together. We realize that there's some other little fingers or lines inside that we will not try to address as we go forward in this. But here again, that's, you're exactly right. And so if we looked at the entire city, we drew a line, about every line that's over 50 years old, it's a pretty good circle. So that would be the area ultimately we'd try to address.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell. I know. Well, and I realize that, you know, it's always hard to raise rates, but I do think this is a prudent thing for us to do, and I realize I don't have a vote, but I certainly would encourage this board to go ahead and take action if we're comfortable doing so, and I hear a consensus in the dialogue, but I would love to see us set it up so that we have this 325 and we move forward with it. But I saw your hand, Alderman Sister.
And I would like to make a motion, but first I need to ask Mr. Kemp, when would you be able to implement this rate increase? What would be your recommended date in terms of getting this put into your billing system?
Usually we go in billing cycles, and so we'd be looking at the first of the month, and that, we could do it within probably 30 days after we kind of get it started, working with our billing group to make sure all the rates are correct and verified.
Okay. So
So that would put us August the 1st. Here again, that's flexible, and I think we do Dr. Barrett said sometimes implementation rates, you might want to actually move it to September, but we could do it within 30 days of
Okay.
the time the board directed us to move in that way.
Okay.
All right, thank
Well,
you.
well, then I would like to move that we adopt a new rate structure and rate schedule for water and sewer services as shown on the handout, and that we begin that effective September 1st.
And when you say on the handout, you're talking about the
The one that I
325,
did, the one that.
325 per gallon, not the upper level?
Yes.
The lower structure?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Mr. Latimer has suggested that I articulate the proposed rate, so I will do that.
Is that
Alderman Sistrunk motion is to adopt the proposed rate of a base rate for the water of $4, a base rate of sewer for $4, base gallons of $1,000, and the variable gallons would be at $3.25, and that includes those outside the city limits, is that correct?
Yes.
Including those outside the city limits, and that it begin effective September 1. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Alderman Little. Do I have further discussion?
Mayor, may I be
Alderman Miller.
recognized? I have three things. The first is for Mr. Kemp. Mr. Kemp, and Alderman Carver alluded to this a moment ago about us basically, we're going to disrupt people's lives probably in these neighborhoods quite a bit, just tearing up the road and going into people's yards and different things. Has there been any consideration, and if not, and perhaps we've discussed it, and if we have, forgive me, but is Starkville Utilities to have somebody designated essentially as a liaison between the citizens and a direct number that they can call, that we know somebody's going to pick up, and we can talk about what's going on that day and where we are in the project as we kind of move forward with this. Has there been any consideration of that, or is it something we can look at?
We've looked at it. We think it's very, very important to have a designated project manager almost on the ground daily when we're out there.
Okay.
We also think, we really think it's important to be proactive and start engaging them now, because telling them how this process will work. And then once the construction group's there, we plan to have people on site.
And I'd like to compliment you on the social media use as well. I think that's been great. I think a lot of people have turned to finding out more information about what's going on with public utilities through the social media outlets. So I, of course, put that information out on there, and I appreciate y'all's communication through that. So.
And I think you talk about an excellent way of doing that, kind of
Right.
like we've done on some of the other things in the city. Each week, kind of give them an update of the
Yeah.
status of where we're going, because, this project will take a good while, even in Pleasant Acres. We talk about it's 100-something homes, but we're planning, that's very, very important.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. The second thing is I did want to thank Dr. Barrett. you know, this is a public service that Dr. Barrett provides, and I know he spends a lot of time digging into these numbers, but you know, I appreciate it, Dr. Barrett, as a citizen of Starkville. You know, this is something that I know that you go into municipalities throughout the entire state and just provide a wonderful service to. And Alderman Carver's exactly right. This is such a benefit for us to have right here in Starkville, to have you here, and then also to provide it as a public service. So I just want you to know, on behalf of the board, how much we appreciate you coming and presenting this to us, because you provided fact-based research that allowed us to hopefully make a good decision as we move forward. So thank you. And then lastly, I do think it's important, and I know she said something, but I did want to give a lot of credit to Mayor Lynn Spruill in terms of being proactive and moving forward with this. You know, of course, you and I have talked and mentioned in the work sessions that, you know, being proactive doesn't mean that we're just going to get something done in one fiscal year. You know, being proactive is taking a look at the big picture and just getting something on paper and at least saying, this is where we're headed and this is what we're trying to do. And Alderman Little talked about this isn't just this board, this is going to be boards to come, and I think that's a real positive. So I want to you know, extend my gratitude to Mayor Spruill for being proactive. I think she's exactly right when she says you don't see other cities throughout the state of Mississippi doing what we're doing tonight and actually trying to attack our infrastructure and get it right. And as I always tell people in the conversations that I have, it's not coming from the federal government, the money, and it's not coming from the state. And we're at the point where it is going to come from our local governing authorities and our municipalities. And so I would argue that we're one of the first to really start taking a look at this and moving in the right direction. So thank you, Mayor.
Well, and thank you. I really am very sincere when I say that. I think that this board is doing something now that is going to be incredibly impactful, incredibly important, and will be looked back on as one of the best things we did. So, all right, I have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion? All right, thank you. If you would please answer the city clerk as she calls your name.
Alderman Carver.
Yay.
Alderman Sistrum.
Yay.
Alderman Little.
Yay.
Alderman Walker.
Yay.
Alderman Miller.
Yay.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
All right, thank you. By a vote of 6-1, the motion carries. Congratulations, folks. I think you've really done a wonderful thing. So, all right, and Dr. Barrett, much appreciation for you coming back a second time and all the work that you did do. And I know it was very detailed. So.
Thank you again.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Next item on the
Mayor
agenda.
Spruill,
Yes, Alderman Carver.
we're traveling. We're traveling. I'm fixing to go to an area with no service that's starting to break up. I'll hang up and wish y'all a happy 4th.
All right, thank you very much, Alderman Carver, and thank you for your vote.
Safe
Yes, ma'am.
travels.
Thank you.
All right, Alderman Carver is now left us, so we can dispense with the roll call. All right, thank you. All right, under board business, we have Mr. Kemp. Mr. Kemp, second.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Board, thank y'all for the opportunity to come and just kind of give a recap of the street improvement project update. I will be brief, but feel free to stop me at any time if you'd like a little bit more information. I know y'all have already had a long, lengthy discussion about infrastructure and maybe a little tired, but this is a little bit of our, just an overview of our street improvement timeline. Just a couple things of note. The board approved the contract on May the 5th, and we actually had the contractor on the ground working within about 3 weeks. It worked out really good from a timing standpoint, and the contractor that had the low bid and that was selected actually was already mobilized into town, so it really worked out well. Another thing of note is we had a really competitive asphalt price this year. We talked a little bit about that at the contract approval stage, $98.50 a ton. It was a good bit less than we've experienced in the last few years, partly in part because of, well, at the time, fuel prices for transport were lower. They've since gone up, but also the size of our project, I think, brought down the overall unit price per ton. And as of last week, our project is 100% completed. So we are finished with the Phase 1, Priority 1 listing of our streets. We still have to pay some bills and things like that, but as far as all the construction has been completed. Just want to go through real quickly. This is the listing that was approved. We completed over 5 miles of road in about a month. Let's see, that would be about a little over a month. So made some good strides. Our contractor had multiple crews in town working, which helped expedite the project. I wanted to just kind of give some photos, some finished product photos. Wanted to start with what I would consider one of the worst road, if not the worst road in town, which was Santa Anita, specifically the east side. It was literally crumbling, and this is what the finished product looks like. Next one I want to show you is the roadway that I received the most complaint, I guess you call it questions or inquiries about. This was a photo of the roadway on Valentine's night this year. We had utility crews down in the middle of the road, a couple feet down, along with some street folks repairing a water line, and then this is our finished product on this section of South Montgomery that, as you know, got bumped up due to the extensive water main break there. Here's a few more just examples. We have Garrett Road there, the bottom left, Lynn Lane, and for all the visitors who are now coming to, the greatest city to live in Mississippi, and they come up Louisville Street, this is their view now as they enter the city limits. And then I want to show y'all what I think is the most transformative roadway that we've experienced in this year, and I give a lot of credit to Alderman Vaughn for his leadership and vision on this. And this is Long Street, what I call Lower Long, that goes right by J.L. King Park. This is a before photo right there at West Side and Mosley.
Can you make that bigger? Is that as big as it can get?
That's as big as I get.
Oh, too bad.
I actually
the
have
difference
a few,
is so
yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, and here's the transformation. You can see. Here's another shot looking up the hill, and then this is kind of what it looks like. As you can see, we kind of shifted the center of the road. Well, actually, beforehand, you can see there's no striping at all, which kind of led for higher speeds. It was just kind of almost a speed track, as Alderman Vaughn and I have talked about a lot. So what we did is we installed bike lanes on either side, as well as diagonal parking on the park side. We were able to create or add about 50 parking spaces. This is the section looking toward Carver Drive. So we now have bike lanes from West Side all the way down to Carver Drive. We have one small gap on Carver, and then we have bike lanes that go from Carver all the way up Hiwassee to Garrett Road. So providing better accessibility to the park, as well as providing more parking for the park, and hopefully lowering speeds. So this was a really bad section, as y'all know, and this is a finished product. So if you hadn't been down Long Street, I'd encourage you to go. It really, I think it's one of the more transformative roadways. And then wanted to just look toward the next group of project. Just a personal note on this is when they were doing the heavy work, doing a lot of paving, my nightly activity is I'd load my 2 older kids up and we'd go around and look at the streets that have been overlaid. That's kind of what we did. And it's funny that my 6-year-old, as we were driving my 6-year-old daughter, she said, "Dad, I really like these soft roads." And I think that's, really it's indicative of not whether you're 6-year-old or 96-year-old. People like new overlays. They like the way they ride, and it's a great thing. As Alderman Little was talking about, infrastructure you can't really get in favor of or don't really see a lot of it that's underground. This is the ones that you see every day and you ride on every day and impacts people's lives. So this is kind of what we're looking forward. We're working with the utilities department and already starting the planning on how some of these projects will overlap with the proposed utility work ongoing coming up. And so we'll continue to start the work on that. And that was basically all I had. If anybody had any questions about the project or
Okay.
where we go from here.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. Any questions, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. I would like to say that this year is one of the quickest turnarounds that I have seen in terms of the Ole company or asphalt company getting out. So the roads do really look great. Of course, Garrett Road from the 25 bypass all the way up to Reed and Garrett. I mean, they did an excellent job. Of course, all the roads are. And you mentioned Santa Anita, and that striping that was last added on Santa Anita, that looks really good. Even on the part that's in Ward 5 looked really good. So I take we're also on schedule on the board approved chip seal for the next part for October
next
this
fiscal
year.
year.
Yes, sir. Okay, everything's on budget. Everything's on schedule.
We have started
bids
planning
and all
on
that.
that. Yes,
Planning.
sir. Yes, sir.
Good to go. So just kind of as you get further along on that, just let us know.
Yes, sir. And thank you for that opportunity, Vice Mayor. We're going to be working on the chip seal. We're also got other road projects. For example, Mill Street, we bid next week, so we'll be doing that roadway this fall, along with hopefully Loxley Way as part of the bike lane. So there's a lot of new street-related improvements, not just this priority one listing that we'll see in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Kemp, thank you for your presentation, and I think it looks great. I think it looks really wonderful. Alderman Walker mentioned earlier, just in terms of economic development, how important infrastructure is in providing basic services to our citizens and making sure that we get those right. This is one of those, and the second you hit some of these streets, just looking at those pictures, it immediately looks cleaner. The city of Starkville does. It just from an aesthetics, it looks like we take pride in our community, which we do, and we know we do. But when people come and visit here, it provides what we talk a lot about. It's creating a sense of place for the city of Starkville. And when people come to Starkville, we want them to know they're in Starkville, Mississippi, because we've got nice roads and good infrastructure. So with that being said, Vice Mayor Perkins referenced our ability to get these roads overlaid quickly this year. Do you see any room or reason that we could kind of move this process forward a little more quickly, maybe next summer when we're kind of in the season to do this again, and how would we do that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think if you look forward, again, we were fortunate to have the timing kind of line up. The way that we structure our contracts is based on a reasonable amount of effort and the time to complete the road. So they basically put a lot of extra crews on it to basically expedite it. The contract time actually doesn't end till probably the 1st of August. So we actually have some additional capacity in there, but the contractors moved on to other projects, of course. I do think that, initially when we were looking at the capital improvement planning process, we were looking at 4 years, $1 million a year dedicated towards street overlays. Of course, we have a priority 5 listing if we are able to dip into those as well. But I do think if we wanted to speed up that a little bit, so for instance, if there was some additional overlay dollars that we could spend in this term instead of spending $4 million just for overlays, and when I say overlays, I'm not talking about these other related types of projects, I'm just talking about the priority 1, 2, 3, 4. If we wanted to spend more than $4 million, I think we could do that. I think you could, I think it's reasonable to think that you could get $1.5 million done in a summer. I think maybe even upwards closer to 2. I think what it does though is there is a limited capacity of our staff, so we may not be able to do as much planning on other types of engineering related projects. So, but this has been, we're doing a lot of planning on projects right now. So I think that next summer we could ramp it up a little bit because a lot of those projects will be in motion, in construction or in bid process. So
I think, and I'll yield to the budget chair here in just a moment, but I think that's something to consider, moving forward if we're able to move the way that we are. And I think this summer was a good test just to see where we're at, and maybe, for the board to consider moving forward, taking a look at that priority list, and because I'm by no means against getting roads paved, as quickly as possible and within what's feasible, obviously. But I'll yield to the budget chair to maybe give us an idea of what that would look like, not to put you on the spot. But
Well, I'm a little on the spot, but not completely, because when we originally developed this, we did it with the idea that we would maybe do $7.5 million worth of improvements, and $5 million to a little over $5 million would be overlays, and it would be broken into 2 bond issuances. And we issued that first bond, which is paying for this, but we went ahead and authorized the issuance of the second bond. And if we think we can spend the money, then I very much agree that we go ahead and move this along as expeditiously as we can.
I agree. I think, are you done?
I am.
So, but I think that's something for us to consider, just as we get into this next, I guess we'll call it the next fiscal year, but,
Yes.
and looking at next summer, I would call upon the board to maybe give Mr. Kemp some more direction about where we want to move forward with this, capital, this overlay plan that we have planned out. So, thank you, Mr. Kemp.
Alderman Vaughn,
Just
second.
thank you so much, because it's something you and I, we looked at many graphs and many diagrams from 2015 when you and I started looking at this. So, we did find something that, would accommodate everybody, something that the whole community was well pleased with. And I just want to thank you for the time that you and I spent together, just going back and forth and changing to meet their needs. And I just thank you so much, because I took a lot of your time.
Oh, it's fine. I enjoyed it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you for the
Thank you.
presentation. Appreciate it. All right. Under planning, we can move to consideration of special event request by United Way to hold second annual run United 5K kickoff.
Move approval.
I have a motion for approval from Alderman Walker, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Alderman Miller. Mr. Latimer, I believe you're talking about insurance, is that correct?
That's right. The special events policy allows an applicant to present insurance up to 30 days before the event, and the insurance is not meeting the city specs yet. So I would just recommend that the motion be conditioned upon the applicant providing proof of insurance consistent with the city's special events policy to city planning staff on or before August 22nd of 2018.
Yes.
What he said.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion from the board? All right, seeing none, if you would please answer yea or nay. Nope, don't have to anymore. If you would, by show of hands, please. All right. Okay, now I've thrown myself all totally out of whack. I was ready for a roll call. I'm so sorry. Okay, please raise your hand if you're in favor of, if you're supportive of the permit. 1, 2, 3, Alderman Miller. And against? All right, thank you. 4 to 2. Shoot. All right, motion carries 4 to 2. Ms. Precinct, you may go home. It is passed. All right. We have consideration of a variant, next item is consideration of a variance 18-03, a request for the variance relief from sidewalk requirements for proposed FEMA community safe house. Do we have an applicant here? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you back there, Ms. Garrett. And Mr. Sanders, you want to come and make a presentation or provide us some additional information, please?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Board of Aldermen. Before you, you have variance case 18-03. The applicant is October County. The county is proposing to build a community safe room. Proposed structure has a maximum occupancy of 555 persons as listed on the preliminary site plans. In an effort to reduce costs, the applicant is requesting relief from sidewalk requirements. The Board of Aldermen granted a landscape waiver from part of the landscape requirements for the project on June 5th, 2018. On June 27th, 2018, the Board of Adjustments and Appeals vote was deadlock, 3-3 and a tie. Therefore, there was no recommendation from the Board of Adjustments and Appeals on this case. I will be glad to answer any questions that the board has.
Mayor, may I recognize?
Vice Mayor, yes, you may.
City Attorney, there's an exception under that ordinance, isn't it, that they have to show undue hardship in the course. And I just want to say this before I ask you the question. They're asking to be exempt from the sidewalk requirements. And the thing that happens, unless they meet that exception, then you'll have others who are going to be similar situated, going to come here and ask this board to be exempt. We've had a lot of people in the past over the years since this sidewalk ordinance was created a number of years ago. So do you have any advice as to whether this applicant meets that exception or that undue hardship based on your data and or information?
The undue hardship test is that the applicant has to establish that the sidewalk construction cost per linear foot is more than 2 times the average rate as documented by the Transportation Committee. And on the packet materials, I don't see that documentation in the packet. I don't know if the applicant has additional information for the board tonight, but it's not in the packet to my knowledge.
But if you hear it, and I haven't seen it either. If you can give, I just want to know if you can get a recommendation. If you hear that or can receive that, and let us know, because otherwise, if there's no evidence to meet that, then there are plenty of people who have come up here in the past, and the board held their feet to the fire, including many notable and high-profile projects where the board required those persons to, including business people of great projects, to comply with this ordinance. So eyes are on this matter very close. So if there's no exemption, then I don't see how we can approve it. So if you can just gather some data and information to see do they meet that exemption, that's what I'm interested in knowing. So legally, I want to be in no box on this. So if you can kind of ascertain that from the applicant and see whether or not they meet that that test.
I'd be happy to.
Yes, sir.
Anything else, Vice Mayor?
No, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I saw Alderman Willis' hand first.
Buddy, I've got a question. Is this in manufacturing zone?
It is. It's located at the intersection. The subject property is located at the intersection of Lynn Lane and Industrial Road, across the street from Rackley Oil in the inland zone.
I may be mistaken, but I had thought that manufacturing zones did not require. Was there an overlay that falls into that? Or
There is we have in Starkville a sidewalk area, and the areas that you have illustrated here in pink are within the sidewalk area, and the property that's outlined in red is the subject property, which is towards the south end, while in an industrial zone, is also in a sidewalk zone.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Walker.
Mr. Sanders, per Vice Mayor's question to the City Attorney, in the packet that you've seen, has there been any indication of the things that the variance request requires in order for this board to exempt that?
Is with regards to cost, not in the application, no.
Yeah, not in the application. Just saying that we don't want to do it because we want to cut costs is not the intent of the variance. And as stated in the work session the other day, is if they don't have that information, then I can't support this. Furthermore, when you talk about what this building is going to be, if it's going to be a safe house for people to be able to get there, in the area where this is building, really there's not that many residents that live there, but we do have 2 major public parks that are right there. So having access I think is of paramount importance. I do know that you've looked at the alternative of working how we work with other developers of them being able to put up a surety bond to be able to fund that. Is that an option that you've communicated with the applicant?
I have communicated that option with their attorney, and one possible option, one thing that the applicant did mention at the Board of Adjustments and Appeals hearing is applying for a grant to pay for the sidewalks. And an option is they can apply for the grant, but in order to get a building permit, I would need a bond for the sidewalks. So while that application goes forward, that would buy them some time to possibly get the funds from a grant to pay for sidewalks. However, at the end of 6 months, if the sidewalks are not in place, then we would exercise the bonds to put them in if the applicant did not.
Yeah, I guess that's my, I'm certainly all for applying for a grant for the sidewalk, and the city potentially could be a partner in that grant application. But the grant itself, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the grant. And so I think we either have to look at a surety bond, which in this case is separate issue from the variance request. What we're dealing with tonight is, are we going to pass this variance request saying that they don't have to build a sidewalk for this project? And based on the information received to date per our code, I don't see how we could support that request.
Thank you, Alderman Miller.
Mayor, I move we deny a request by Oktibbeha County for a variance relief from sidewalk requirements for proposed FEMA community safe room at the southeast corner of the intersection of Lynn Lane and Industrial Park Road.
Okay, I have a motion to deny the variance request. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Vice Mayor Perkins. All right, any further discussion?
Maybe heard, Mayor.
I'll just make you wait. No, I'm kidding. Any further discussion from the board members? If not, Alderman, Attorney Latimer.
Ms. Gerard, does the county have any proof that the cost of the sidewalk is more than 2 times the average rate?
The county provided documentation at the Board of Adjustments meeting, and I've also sent each of the aldermen a copy of the information. I haven't seen it. And I don't know what the DOT rate is, but according to our architect, the sidewalk is 51,164 for linear foot. And it's not that the county is anti-sidewalks, we are. And right now, funding a sidewalk grant for lots of way in Blackjack with the city of Starkville and MSU in an area where sidewalks are widely used and are needed. And if we don't run out of funding and providing other things for this safe road, that they won't fund, we don't have a problem with the sidewalks there. But the county's cost to fund these sidewalks and fund the landscaping and everything that the grant does not pay for is $252,000. The county's part that has to assist for the grant is $208,000. So if we have to cut all the sidewalks, landscaping and everything, in addition to what we gotta pay for the building, if the county's gonna be out $461,000. So that's where we were asking for some assistance, not that we don't want to do the sidewalks, but trying to put other things in there that the citizens can use and will need. And we don't feel like right there at the end of Lynn Lane and Industrial Park Road, there's gonna be that much use for it. And
Thank-
that's what we're asking for.
And just to recap, all the materials that you have related to cost of this sidewalk as it compares to the average rate were presented to the city planning staff and were forwarded to the Board of Aldermen, and is what they have before them today.
It's all been given to them, and, given to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, it's put on their table and handed out to each other at the meeting last week.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Attorney, I have not seen anything.
It's not in the packet.
It's not a good email either, I just checked.
Were you at the Board of Adjustments and Appeals meeting, Mr.
I
Sanders?
was, but I did not receive a copy
And you
of
were
it.
provided with that copy? Okay.
I gave each of the members there.
Mayor, she needs to be recognized.
Yeah, Ms. Garrett, hang on just a second. Mr. Sanders, you didn't receive it from the Board of Adjustments and Appeals?
I did not receive a copy. It could have been passed out, but I did not receive a copy.
Did you know if they took that under consideration when they were making their deliberations? If they were provided it?
I do not.
Okay, all right, thank you. Ms. Garrett, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes, Mrs. Coburn emailed me and told me to, just give them to them at the table, so I gave 4 to the board members there, and I gave the other ones to the gentleman, I can't think of his name.
Mr. Haviland?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
For them,
So they had that for their deliberations, I guess is the point. All right, thank you, ma'am. Okay. I have a motion and a second on the table. Do I have any further discussion from board members? Alderman Sister.
However the vote goes, if that is a path forward for a variance, and if you can provide us some documentation, and I haven't gotten the email either, but
I sent an email to each of y'all, to City of Starkville, with their email address.
yeah, I have not gotten mine, so I don't know if there's something happening with our email or not, but if it does not pass tonight, and I'm not thinking that it's going to, then if you can provide us that, we can certainly reconsider.
Well, and let's be clear, if the Board of Adjustments and Appeals had that information, then that was part of their deliberation.
Well,
and this is not this is for a denial, so there wouldn't be a variance. If this passes, there will be no variance.
Well, it does have a linear foot calculation in here. Do we know how that compares to the, there is a.
Okay, I've got one conversation going on here.
There's no comparison to the average
Okay.
rate.
Alderman Sister.
Do we know what the average rate is?
Do we know what the average
The
rate is?
MDOT rate is between $5 and $6 per square foot.
Per square or linear?
Excuse me, linear foot.
$5 to $6 per linear foot?
I'm sorry?
Okay, one question at a time. Alderman Sistrunk, your
Did I
question
understand
is
your
about
question being what the
There is
value of the.
there is a calculation in here that comes out to $51.64 per linear foot.
And the MDOT calculation that we use is between $5 and $6 a square foot.
So then based on those numbers, it would meet the exception.
Yes, sir, that
If
would
the
be
math was
correct.
accepted. That math was not accepted.
Okay, so.
You have a flat, I mean, I guess the.
Let me get through the process here. All right. Alderman Sistrunk, you're done? Alderman Walker, you have? Yes, no?
I'm not completely
No,
done.
I'm done.
I'm still trying to work through the calculation.
Okay, well, point is, even if it meets the exception, if the board wants to grant it, they can. If they don't, they don't have to. Is that correct, Attorney Latimer?
Reading the language. You know, the exception is very narrowly tailored to be a pure economic and math decision. The exception can occur if it's more than 2 times the average rate. It's documented by the Transportation Committee.
Can occur, but is not mandated.
It doesn't say shall.
Okay, all right, so, there we have it. So, I'm still working with a, motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? We can do up or down on the vote? Okay? All right, please answer yea. Please answer yea if you're in favor of the denial. This will be to be in favor of the denial. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The motion passes, the variance is denied, and that means a bond would be appropriate. That would be the remedy or the opportunity for them to meet the requirement. Okay, thank you. All right, next item is the claims docket.
So moved.
I have a stereo motion. Alderman Little, was that you?
Sure.
All right.
Second.
I have a second from Alderman Miller. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, I need to get it on record. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that would be 4-2. Motion carries. Thank you. And that takes us to the end of our,
Move to go into closed session.
all right, I have a motion to go into closed
Second.
session from Alderman Little and a second from Alderman Miller. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're going into
Yes, sir.
In executive session, the board moved to approve the settlement of the case with the city of Starkville, Mississippi versus Daniels Investment LLC, LMK LLC, and Margaret Sudeth Copeland, cause number 2017-415-CVH, pending in the special court of eminent domain, Oktibbeha County, Mississippi. And having no further business, the board need a motion to recess until July the 10th at 3 p.m.
Mayor, I move that this board stand in recess until 3 p.m. on next Tuesday, July 10 of 2018 in this boardroom.
All right, I have a motion from the Vice Mayor, second from Alderman Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We are in recess.
All right, y'all have a good holiday tomorrow, folks.
All right, thank you. Everyone have a great Fourth.